It's the most wonderful time of the year. You're out of your mind if you think I'm talking about Christmas. I'm actually talking about the season of Halloween for horror fans. This is something that we've been looking forward to all year long, guys. I'm so excited. I'm going to be working at Spirit Halloween tomorrow. Yep, Spirit Halloween. I've been working there during the month of October. It's been a lot of fun. I've gotten to see some really cool sights. But today, we're going to be talking about a movie that has been delayed and delayed and delayed time again, but it is finally out. It's called Antlers, and it's produced by none other than Guillermo del Toro, one of the most visual directors in modern Hollywood history. He's made some truly fantastic fantasy films, including The Shape of Water, Hellboy, Mimic, and don't forget, Kronos, one of his earlier features. But Antlers is a film that I was curious about, because I knew that if it had Guillermo del Toro producing it, and it was essentially a creature feature, that it was probably going to contain this very impressive looking creature, which eventually it does. We do get a good look at this creature, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but let's just say that if you're familiar with the Wendigo legend, you probably have an idea of what it looks like. But I just want to start this review off with a warning. I want to issue a warning to you guys. So it became abundantly clear to me tonight that there are many people who go to a horror movie looking for safe horror. Horror that entertains them. Horror that they can still feel safe with. Horror that makes them feel comfortable and doesn't really, push them, to their psychological limits. This film is incredibly dark, sullen. It is, at times, unbearably depressing. I mean, this is a heavy, heavy film, and I noticed that a lot of audience members in the theater weren't exactly digging it. In fact, I could tell that they weren't in the mood to watch a movie like this, a movie that really pushes them, a movie that shows them what real horror is. And here's the thing, guys, there's nothing wrong with entertaining horror. I mean, I really love films like It, The Conjuring, Insidious. I enjoy films that can be entertaining, but to me, true horror is something that should really get under your skin and, make you feel really uncomfortable. Horror films that make you, really face your fears and maybe make you a little bit more comfortable about the world around you. This film does just that. It is a heavy metaphor for grief and trauma. It's less of a creature feature and more a psychological study of trauma. And when it eventually does turn into a quote-unquote creature feature, it does deliver the goods. There are a couple of gruesome highlights, but overall, this is a dark and barren movie. And it's made clear early on that this is meant to be a dark fable, kind of like a dark fairy tale. The main character, played by Kerry Russell, is this elementary school teacher who goes to live with her brother, after moving away for several years. And it becomes clear that her and her brother don't have the best relationship, and we find out that both of them were actually abused by their father when they were kids. Are you entertained yet? Because this movie is just getting warmed up. But that's the central premise of this movie. Kerry Russell begins to notice this one child in her classroom, this child named Lucas, who is kind of the typical horror movie kid at first. He's making these really creepy drawings, and he seems, mature beyond his years, and he's obviously been, disturbed by something. And we eventually find out what that something is, and you learn more and more about this kid and, his relationship with his father and his younger brother and, what's going on, inside his house. In the meantime, Kerry Russell is trying to, find out as well what is going on with this kid. And she does a little investigating of her own. She is begging her brother, who is the town sheriff, to investigate as well. And here's the thing, guys. I know I'm probably going to get a little heavy here, but when I first left Antlers, I did feel a little bit cold. And it's a movie that really gets you thinking. I mean, my brain was on fire after leaving the theater because I just had so many thoughts enter my head. And here's the thing. Initially, I thought that the reason I left this movie feeling cold was because the characters were so emotionally distant from one another. And I was wondering, well, because, I wonder if because the characters are so emotionally distant and cold, does that make it difficult for the audience to really, connect with them or sympathize with them? But I talked to some friends who, not to get into heavy, and not to get too specific, but I have some friends who, let's just say, have experienced trauma in their lives, and what they essentially told me is, unless you've experienced that kind of trauma, you're not really going to sympathize with people like this because you can't possibly understand, what they're going through. And so, an audience member like me, who doesn't really understand what true trauma is, it was difficult for me to latch onto these characters. It really was. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't find them the most interesting, throughout the movie. But then again, characters like these do hide, all of their grief inside. They aren't willing to share it with others. And Kerry Russell does have a couple of nice moments with the young boy. There's actually a very cute moment where they're sitting inside a cafe, or excuse me, an ice cream shop, and she's pretending that the ice cream is her favorite kind of vegetable, and they have a cute moment, between the two of them. And initially I felt that their relationship wasn't developed the best, but then I realized it's because the boy has experienced some trauma of his own, so he's not willing to open up to others either. And the ending, not to give too much away, but Kerry Russell essentially she has to confront her past in a way where, again, not to get too spoiler heavy, but she was able to move out of her house, when her father was abusing her and her brother, but she left her brother there. She essentially had to sacrifice an innocent in order to save herself. And so she left, but her brother had to undergo some really, really just terrible, terrible things. I mean, unspeakable things. And so at the end, Kerry Russell has to make this ultimate decision. Can she, essentially sacrifice another innocent? And it's heartbreaking. Speaking of the climax, so the setup for the climax is, pretty neat. It does take place in this dark, dimly lit, underground tunnel, and it's a really neat setup, but the ultimate confrontation could be perceived as kind of weak. Not to give anything away, but the eventual confrontation with the monster, it does end kind of abruptly, and let's just say the final shot in this movie, it's the kind of ending you would expect in a movie like this. Let's just say that something happens and, you leave the theater thinking, oh, okay, well, not necessarily a happy ending, but I guess it's the ending that, is appropriate for a story like this. From a technical standpoint, I thought this movie was incredibly well done. This town is constantly just engulfed in mist and fog, and it makes it feel like it's cut off from the rest of the world. Like these events are only happening here, and it's like we're reading a storybook. These are the events that are taking place in this town, in this rundown, poverty-stricken town. And the cinematography really captures just the coldness of this town. It feels like a very emotionally empty place, and that makes sense because some really terrible things have happened here. Some more problems I had with the movie. Like I mentioned earlier, this is definitely going to split some people down the middle. I wasn't entirely sure what to think about it, and like I said, initially I thought that if you're going to make a movie about grief and trauma, you really should learn more about these characters, and by the end of the movie, these characters probably should have opened themselves up a little bit more, but then my friends made that really good point, is that people who have experienced that won't necessarily be so willing to open up, so it's difficult. It's definitely a well-acted movie. I thought Kerry Russell was effective, as the main character. Graham Greene makes an appearance in this movie. Remember Graham Greene? He was the Native American in Dances with Wolves. But yeah, all the actors were fine. Jesse Plemons was fine. The boy in this, oh my god, you could just tell that he is carrying this huge burden on his shoulders. He just looks downright miserable throughout the movie, and he definitely is. I mean, he's dealing with some very, very heavy shit. But the performances were fine, all around. Another problem I had was it did contain some typical horror cliches. Graham Greene is the local expert who knows everything about the Wendigo legend. He's able to deliver exposition to the other main characters, and we've seen that scenes in a million times in other fantasies and other horror movies. And we've also there are also some characters in this movie who do make some questionable decisions that horror movie characters usually make. Like, there's a school principal who goes to this dilapidated house, and it's obvious that she shouldn't be going inside by herself because it's a very disgusting, scary looking place, but she decides to do that anyway. there's also another scene where this police officer is investigating a strange noise in this shed, and man, yeah, Antlers, while it did have some effective moments, it still contained some of those annoying horror cliches. And the first half was rather slow. You know, it has a lot of buildup, and when it does eventually get to, you know, the monster stuff, I think most audiences will probably be mostly pleased. There are a couple of good kills in this movie, at least decent kills, and the look of the creature, it's obvious why Guillermo del Toro wanted to produce this movie. You know, he wanted to create this fantastical looking Wendigo creature, and it does have a really good design. It's exactly what you think a Wendigo would look like, and from what I could tell, most of the shots of the Wendigo were practical. It looked like this enormous Jim Henson-like puppet. It kind of reminded me of the Krampus character in 2015's Krampus, which, by the way, is a holiday classic. I love 2015's Krampus. But yes, guys, Antlers is a difficult movie. It's not entertaining. It's not fun to watch. It will probably make you feel very sick inside. You probably won't feel the best after watching it. You know, let's just say that. But it is challenging horror. Other films like it would probably be It Comes at Night, The Witch, and, you know, one more thing that I want to say is when it comes to Guillermo del Toro's movies, you know, when he directs a movie, and again, he didn't direct this, but his movies tend to be supernatural on the surface, but they're much more about the evils of humanity. Like in Pan's Labyrinth. In Pan's Labyrinth, yeah, you get the fantastical creatures, you get the fawn, you know, you get the pale man, you know, the thing with the eyes in its hands, but the human characters in that movie are also pretty terrible and terrifying. You know, the same thing with Devil's Backbone. So he tends to show how humans can sometimes be even more cruel and ruthless than the monsters of old. And the characters in this just, at least I felt, just didn't have enough interest to them. At least, you know, not to the level of like a Guillermo del Toro feature, you know, something that he directed. But anyway, guys, is this worth seeing? If you go in with the right mindset, if you know that this is going to be a much more challenging horror movie, then you might appreciate it a bit more. Again, it's not for the faint of heart. There are some pretty disturbing sights in this movie. But if you know what to expect, you might get some thrills out of it, and you'll probably appreciate how it actually does make an attempt to dive into the psychology of its characters. And that's something to be commended. I mean, it definitely feels less like a studio horror movie, like a studio-driven corporate sellout. Something like The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I was not a big fan of that movie. I thought that movie was less than appealing, let's just say that. But yes, guys, it's Halloween. I mean, go out there and have some fun. I mean, go crazy, you know, do things that... I'm gonna give you permission here, guys. I mean, not that you need it, but go and do things that you normally wouldn't do as, you know, a member of normal society. But let's be honest, who wants to be a member of normal society anyways? But I really hope you enjoy yourselves this holiday season. You know, again, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of Antlers, the new 2021 horror film directed by Scott Cooper. And I'm also looking forward to checking out Last Night in Soho. Last Night in Soho is a new Edgar Wright film, and I love me some Edgar Wright, so I'll probably be checking that out tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to make a review for that, but we do have some exciting videos in the works, things that we have been looking forward to bringing you guys. If you like this, please subscribe to our channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. And as always, have a very scary day, boils and ghouls, and go out and enjoy the holiday. Seriously, have a good time, guys, and take care. Happy Halloween!